At the heart of science is an essential balance between two seemingly contradictory attitudes, an openness to new ideas, no matter how bizarre or counterintuitive they may be, and the most ruthless skeptical scrutiny of all ideas, old and new. This is how deep truths are winnowed from deep nonsense.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all mankind. Your hosts, here in London, Matthew Russell and Jamie Franklin.
Oh yeah, baby, Sagan! Hail Sagan!
Hail Lord Sagan!
Yeah.
On the second week of January.
A poignant quote in these times, I would say, Matthew. So well chosen.
Crackers, people out there spouting crackers stuff.
Absolutely.
But I've got a good couple of guests. This was an interview I did before Christmas and was supposed to come out for our Christmas episode, but because the Spodcat episode ended up being so long, I ended up not putting it on the end because this is actually a very long interview in itself. So it's with a couple of artists, one Ian Lauer, who's an astronomer and an astrophotographer, and Cathrin Machin, who's actually a pretty famous space artist. I didn't realise that I've been following her on Twitter for a long time and know her work actually really well. She'll tell you about her art, but one of the cool things is that it glows in the dark.
Oh,
That's
wow.
one of the things that it does.
Nice. Okay, I love it.
Yeah, she's a sort of crowd-funded painter.
Yeah.
And she's now the world's biggest crowd-funded painter.
Wow.
Or the highest crowd-funded painter.
Amazing.
And she's on her fourth crowdfunding campaign, to build a massive 3D chandelier replica of the Milky Way.
Oh, yes.
Based on Gaia data. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yosh!
Nice. So I love
Based
that
on
we've
Gaia
got like,
data. Yeah.
you know, a photographer and an artist. And I think this is where science meets art, Matthew. This is where they meet. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, well, that's the old STEAM thing, isn't it? The old science, technology, engineering, art and maths.
Oh,
and there is definitely something in it.
Wow, I do a lot of STEM workshops in schools. And funnily enough, I come from, my company as creatives comes from an artistic background. You know, we're all drama people and actors. And I've never heard that. I've never heard STEAM.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's like super important. I think that if you just do science or engineering in isolation, it's like, well, you know, how does it connect on a human level? And actually, art really satisfies that end of it, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean,
hence Feynman was a great artist and
Carl
Sagan was a great artist. I mean,
yeah. And is it a misquote by Churchill where they were talking about, you know, cutting the arts budget during the war or something, and he said, well, that, you know, what would we be fighting for then? I might be completely misquoting him, and it might be one of those memes that I just got like I can't imagine that actually was an arts budget during the war.
No, I'm sure there was. But if he did say that, that's very cool. Because I always think the same thing. It's like when people sort of say, oh, what a waste of money the Olympics is. And it's like, well, what else are we doing here if we're not going to do things like sport and art and everything else? It just seems, it always seems really weird. It's like, yeah, that the science is there to allow us to do art and sport. That's the whole point, surely. Unless you're doing science for science sake.
Interconnectivity.
Yeah, it's all interconnected. Well, we talk about this. We talk about this in the interview, so let's not spoil it. There's a birthday today of a chap that really gets no mention ever. In fact, it was quite hard to find anything out about him.
What?
On the 11th of January, 1926, a guy called Liv Diehlmann. Now, Liv Diehlmann was a Soviet cosmonaut who went on Soyuz 15 in 1974. Now, I guess one of the reasons why you don't hear of him, because the mission wasn't that successful. It was supposed to dock with Salyut 3, the space station, but it didn't. It failed. The docking failed.
Oh, no.
But he is the first grandfather to go into space. You know, he's got a first under his belt, a one that will never be beaten.
Give us a roll of your rocket, Grandad.
Exactly. So he's the first granddad into space. That's genius. He was an astronaut right up until 1982. He left to get involved in deep sea research before dying of cancer in 1998. But he was quite old.
How old was he?
What, 1998 from 26 is 72?
I think he was born and died on the same years as my grandfather.
Wow. Was your grandfather the first person in space?
He was also, but also he, old Lev here shares a birthday with my dear wife. It's her birthday tomorrow. So,
wow, there we go.
Sorry, today.
Kaya shares a birthday with Liv Diehlmann, except Lev was born in Moscow. Liv was born in Moscow, and he's a doctor as well. He got a doctoral degree as well as being a Soviet Air Force Engineering Academy colonel in the Soviet Air Force. Pretty qualified dude.
Yeah, we salute you, Lev.
So, flying to space when you're sort of round about 50 just isn't that unusual.
No,
Lev was doing it
not.
back in 1974.
Yeah.
Back in 1974.
He must have been a fit 48-year-old. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
and that's what I aim to be when I'm 48.
After having a conversation with Matthias last week, just on Zoom, he looks like he's 30. It's just ridiculous. So yes, he's definitely fit. So yeah, I think you have to be fit to be an astronaut. There's no two ways about it. You can't go up as a big old out of shape
rotund.
You can't, beer swilling, peanut eating, pie eating football fan. Probably not the best.
Okay. I'm not going to apply. Okay.
No,
stop rubbing it in.
The weirdest thing about you is you're a Scouser who isn't a football fan. That's the weirdest. You're almost like an outlier.
It's just not in my mindset. I do enjoy watching a game now and then. In fact, I wish I was in the UK so I could watch Marine FC playing Tottenham Hotspur. Marine FC is probably one of our most famous local teams. They're based in Crosby. It's bizarre. They're playing Tottenham. The cleaner from their building is the goalie and stuff like that. It's true. But yeah, enough about football. I can't stand football. What are we talking about?
Absolutely ludicrous.
Space news! We want some space news!
Before I do a bit of space news, I really, really have been very slack with shouting out to the Justins. I need to shout out to the Justins. This is so overdue. Justin Young and Justin Roberts, who are like mega Patreons at the most powerful level.
Yeah.
And without them, this show would be impossible. So thank you, Justin Young, and thank you, Justin Roberts. You are total legends.
Thank you, Justin Squared.
Yeah, and I'll be reading out the rest of the Spodcats, most of whom joined me on the for our Christmas special, but there's certainly a whole bunch of them who couldn't quite make it. And I wish they could, because it would have been even more of a party. But I'll mention them at the end of the show. But yes, shall we get on to a bit of space news?
Yeah.
And I guess this is obviously, for us Brits, this is kind of cool. The Virgin Orbit Launcher 1 rocket, which may start flying out of Cornwall. Might become the UK's first ever orbital launch if it does.
That's a big rocket.
Boeing 747 Cosmic Girl is flying a bunch of CubeSats, possibly, into orbit, part of the NASA's Eleanor program, the Education Launch of Nanosatellites program. And actually, if you read about all of these little satellites, they're absolutely ace. Cactus 1, Cape 3, ExoCube 2, Pix 1, Pix 2, Polar Cube. They're all really, really, really cool. I'll give an example. So Pix are a pair of two satellites, Pix 1 and Pix 2, PICS. And that's a technology demonstrator that can perform inspection, maintenance, and assembly on another spacecraft. So the two flight systems deployed simultaneously enable the collection of image data from each other as well as the parent spacecraft. So it's a sort of technology checker out. And that's just one of all these tiny little CubeSats that are going up on this Virgin Orbit Launcher 1 this week. So that could be pretty big. That could be a big one.
I know we've talked about this before, but what kind of size are we talking here? I know we've had an old episode on this, but I can't quite remember what size these little fellas are, these CubeSats. I mean, what can we compare them to?
Yes, 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters is one unit, but often they're several units put together. So quite a common one would be 30 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. Things like the Doves are like that. The Planet Lab Doves are that type of CubeSat. They're really cool because they allow, schools to get involved, and the NASA Eleanor program is really, really cool, trying to get as many CubeSats into space as possible and helping people and giving them expertise and all those kind of things. So the Cape 3, for example, is the smartphone CubeSat Classroom. If you've got the right smartphone app, it can act as a ground station, and you can actually run experiments from your smartphone on the CubeSat, this Cape 3.
That's so cool.
So that might be happening this week. And if not, it almost certainly will happen at some point in January. Of course, this is a launcher that's not worked yet. So this is, it's highly risky. So all these CubeSats, years of work, could all be destroyed very, very quickly in a disaster. Let's hope not. Let's wish Virgin Orbit all the luck in the world on this one. Yeah, very cool.
Let's have some faith in those engineers.
Yes.
We've got one on our team who knows his onions.
Come on, Richard Branson.
Come on.
This was a funny one that Eric Berger I spotted was going on about. Roscosmos have apparently sued themselves. So yes, which is quite funny because Dmitry Rogozin, possibly one of my favorite people in space because he's so ludicrous. He put on Facebook that several years ago, one of the subsidiary companies had used a rocket to put a satellite into orbit that they had also manufactured, and unfortunately the satellite stopped working. The legislation requires Roscosmos to file a lawsuit against them. But of course, they're a subsidiary, so it's essentially a lawsuit against themselves. But not only that, the guilty people that were part of this broken satellite have all left the company anyway. So his point was, they're going to be punishing the enterprise full of employees who didn't make the mistake. But he also pointed out if they didn't start the lawsuit, the management of Roscosmos themselves would have to stand trial for failing to react to the mistake. So
this is brilliant. This is like a Tommy Cooper sketch. I mean, it's just like, have the two costumes on one side of you and one on the other. So you've got a barrister on one side and you've got the accused on the other. It's the same guy. So you think to settle, they might borrow money from the company so they can pay it. That would be great.
You must have done those sort of exercises as an acting student where you have to pretend you're phoning yourself.
Yeah, I spent 3 years as a tree.
just doing that one piece of training. So maybe you could phone up Dimitri.
Yeah, but weirdly enough, I did sue myself in the end for that. So for impersonating a tree.
Yeah, I was thinking of suing myself for doing the degree I did. Sue old Matt.
Me too.
That's what clearly wasn't the degree I needed to do. What were you thinking? I'm suing old Matt. Right.
Really just suing your former self.
Suing your former self. There must be a precedent for that. Talking of not necessarily loved government projects, there's the NASA SLS hot fire test, probably this week as well, maybe.
Ouch.
Which is, they're going to fire up those beautiful space shuttle main engines that are now going to sitting at the bottom of the Space Launch System, and they're going to fire them up for an 8-minute burn. It's going to be pretty. That would actually be pretty epic to be down there to see 4 space shuttle main engines blasting away for 8 minutes. Yep, there we go. So, and another
looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward to that. SN9 will also probably have some form of static fire test. If not, it might even attempt another SN8 hop into the sky and belly flop down onto the ground. So, there's two completely different ways of working right there. The governmental,
I'm all about
NASA,
the belly flop.
Go slow, let's get this right. And the SpaceX, I'll just cobble it together in the desert somewhere approach. And then there's Jeff Bezos's approach, which is just do the whole thing in secret and don't tell anyone what's going on. And the only thing that has come out is that he's named the boat that's going to catch the New Glenn rocket Jacqueline. And do you know who Jacqueline is?
No.
There presumably is a woman called Jacqueline Bezos, who is Jeff's mum.
Jeff's mum?
Couldn't be more appropriately named. Mum has always given us the best place and best heart to come home to. Beautiful, huh?
Yeah, that's lovely.
That is.
It sounds like a Scouse insult, like your ma's a landing pad.
Your mum's so big she could be a landing pad for the largest ever rocket booster.
I landed a rocket on your ma.
Yeah, I reckon that you might get beaten up for being geeky. It's a sort of switcheroo, isn't it, that? But Elon Musk overtook Bezos to become the richest man on the planet this week. How insane is that?
And he moved past he's moved up 2 places quite swiftly, hasn't he?
Yeah, but it's all about Tesla. So I think the Tesla shares are just going through the roof because they've just become this really viable car business that's much bigger than everyone else. And of course, it's like, battery cars won't be forever, will they? It's like, they're kind of the future. So I can see that one just going on and on and on, So, it's a strange one, isn't it? But yeah, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, both pretty goddamn wealthy, and they're both intent on getting into space.
Lovely stuff.
Who would have thought that buying an electric car would get humanity on Mars?
Oh, I saw the SpaceX Tesla Model X the other day as well, back in Norway, and the it must be the only one. There's a Model X Tesla going around here with the registration plate SpaceX. I mentioned it on the first episode I was on. I saw it again the other day, and I was in Oslo, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Trying to look inside to see who it was, but I don't think it was Elon.
Well, I wonder if they're a listener to the Interplanetary podcast. If you are, why don't you let us know? It'd be great if we could get if we could connect, and maybe you can get lifts to work from him or her. Or it. It might be. It might. Of course, it could be a dog. Could be a dog. Or it might be just self-driving. Maybe. I just don't know. Anyway, I loved Elon Musk's response to being the richest person in the world. He paused for a second to go, "Oh yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's a bit of an odd feeling being the richest person in the world that's ever existed." Well, okay, back to work.
Back to work.
Although I bet he popped some champagne with Grimes later that night.
Yeah, I imagine he does it with a sword, like they do, like that sort of pop champagne maneuver.
Yeah, chop the top off of a Moetan Shandon with a lightsaber that he's been secretly developing.
Get your laughing gear around this, Grimes. Sorry, I'm being all scouse today. I think it's because I'm missing home or something.
Get your laughing gear around this, Grimes.
We better be careful with what we're saying there.
I see what we've done. Do you know what I haven't done for a long time, Chris? Is done a science story. Just haven't done a science story.
Oh.
And this one piqued my interest this week, so I thought I'd quickly do it before we go to the interview. Some astronomers, that is Lydia M. Oskinova et al., have noticed a very, very bright star, very bright in X-rays, that must be a new type of star.
What?
Formed from the merger of 2 white dwarfs. So they've spotted this new star. Now, it comes from a paper called X-ray observations of a super Chandrasekhar object reveal a ONE and CO white dwarf merger product embedded in a putative SN lax remnant. Which, if that's not a great paper title, I don't know what is.
Oof.
So
it's a beauty.
So here's the kind of rundown. So basically, this very bright and unusual X-ray emission was coming from a star called J005311, and it looks like that the explanation is that 2 white dwarfs have merged together. So a white dwarf is what our sun will become. It will sort of start going crazy, burning the wrong type of fuel, expand, but then eventually it will collapse, and the whole mass of it will collapse to about the size of the Earth, but the mass of the sun still. So it will be a big old hot white dwarf in the center of the solar system, but Chandrasekhar put a limit on how big these things could get before they would collapse into a neutron star. Obviously, if it gets too big, the whole thing will just collapse into a neutron star. If a neutron star gets too big, it collapses into a black hole. I'm sure it's more complicated than that, but that's pretty much it.
That sums it up for me.
So if you have two white dwarfs smashing into each other, of course, it might be then that they go over the Chandrasekhar limit and would collapse into a neutron star. But this one is, that they've discovered this star is too bright to be just an ordinary white dwarf. So they've been looking at it, doing spectroscopy and stuff, and looking at the X-rays coming off using the XMM Newton, which is ESA's big X-ray space telescope. Very underrated space telescope, in my opinion, and we should talk about it more. I guess this is, should be quite common because often stars come in binaries. So if you've got a binary of stars that are like the sun, it'll be quite natural that the outcome of that would be two white dwarfs eventually becoming a binary of two white dwarfs. And then, of course, eventually they will sort of wind down and smash into each other.
Do you think this may have happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away?
This probably did happen a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, which I must admit I did thoroughly enjoy The Mandalorian. If anyone hasn't seen it,
it's superb.
See it. It's amazing.
As a tangent, I did ask if anybody saw the little nod to sort of modern rocket technology, but I don't know if you spotted it. Yeah.
I hadn't watched any of them when you told me that. And then, of course, I instantly spotted what you were talking about when it happened. I went, oh, of course, that's what Chris was talking about. Yes, very funny.
It was the same episode, not to go on too far of a tangent, but it's the same episode where they included a quite common British meme as well, where a lot of people who were raised Catholic, every time they hear "May the Force be with you," their immediate response is "and also with you," because that's part of the Catholic Mass. And he says it in that same episode. The X-Wings are flanking him. He says, the Mandalorian says, "May the Force be with you." And the pilot, there's a few seconds pause, and he's like, "and also with you." And I was just like, yes, amazing.
That is very funny, good. Isn't it? Yeah, well, we're here. So usually white dwarfs, right? They're made of two different things. They're either carbon and oxygen. So it's just the carbon and oxygen left. And they're known as CO white dwarfs. But if the mass of the original star is sort of between 8 and 10 solar masses, so it will be big enough that the core temperature will be sufficient to fuse the carbon, but not neon. So you end up with an oxygen neon magnesium star white dwarf, which are just known as ONE white dwarfs. That's capital O, capital N with a small e. Otherwise, it would just be one white dwarf, which would be very annoying. And it looks like this is a merger between both types, an ONE and a CO white dwarf, which means that it almost certainly went over this super Chandrasekhar mass limit. And the X-ray indicates that there was a massive episode of carbon burning during the formation. And they can see this sort of point source where the X-rays are coming from, where the merger product is, and the nebula, the sort of supernova remnant around it from all the gas that's been coming off from these two stars as they went supernova. And it looks likely that the very sort of last part of all of this is eventually this enormous white dwarf, basically that's been a merger of two white dwarfs, will eventually collapse into a neutron star. So it'll take a few thousand years, but eventually it will collapse into a neutron star.
And would that be classed as one neutron star? It won't be classed as two. They've fused, they've become one. Basically.
Yeah, so there should be some kind of weird type 1 supernova as it collapses. But there should be some new supernova event. But of course, I guess they won't know what that looks like until it actually happens. And I mean, I guess they'll have some good theoretical models about what will happen. But I guess, that it'll be really exciting now that they've spotted one of these things, I guess, is to look out for these types of supernova when these new types of white dwarf are actually collapsing into supernova. So that's it's a really cool little paper. It's great, isn't it? Well. That they're still finding new things out there in space all the time.
Yeah, incredible.
It's just never ending.
Maybe I will continue to. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You asked me to do a news story. Do you remember?
Yeah. What have you got? What have you got up your sleeve, Chris?
I've got an absolute beauty of an acronym, and I know Jamie's very fond of his acronyms.
Oh, I love an acronym
so
too.
This is the news of the NASA have given the go-ahead for a new space telescope called Spherex. Spherex. And it's going to help to unravel the mysteries of the Big Bang. And it's a beauty. It's about the size of a compact car, and it's hexagonal, this sort of hexagonal upright cone, which just looks beautiful. So you can Google that and have a little gander at how it looks. But yeah, the actual the acronym is, wait for it, Spectrophotometer for the History of the Universe, Epoch of Reionization and ICE's Explorer.
That is very
Isn't
good.
that great? It's going to launch in 2024, so it's going to be a fast development by JPL. But yeah, they've given it the go ahead. In fact, it's in phase C, so that just means that the agency has approved preliminary design plans for the observatory, and they can start basically going into a detailed design and start to build the hardware and the software. So it's a very exciting thing that it's going to be doing. So it's going to be detecting near-infrared light or wavelengths several times longer than the light visible to the human eye. So during its 2-year mission, it will map the entire sky 4 times, creating a massive database of stars, galaxies, nebulas, and many other celestial objects. I got that from scitechdaily.com. And it's good. It's not too sort of sensational, the story, actually. If it goes ahead, very exciting stuff.
It's part of the Medium Explorer program, TESS, Icon, and Spherex. So yeah, it's a funky looking thing, isn't it? It's well cool.
It's beautiful. So yeah, looking forward to that. I mean, that's going to fly by 24, 25. I mean, that's literally no time before that's up in the sky doing that.
You'll combine all its measurements, won't it, with Euclid and the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope.
We're gonna have just this incredibly detailed map of the sky, and as you say, we're discovering new things all the time. So hopefully this is going to throw up a few more incredible discoveries for us to report.
Yeah, it's just one more observatory looking in a slightly different wavelength of light that you can add to the big massive data pile to kind of eke out every single thing that you want to know about the universe. So cool. Oh my God. I love things like this. It's amazing, isn't it? The launch date being 2024. That's cool. I wonder what it's going to go up on.
Yeah.
Because it's only 69 kilograms. So it's pretty small.
Well,
it might even go up on a Virgin orbit.
Maybe from Cornwall, or what do you think?
Oh my God, that would be amazing. No way, though. Not if it's NASA.
No.
It might do, I suppose, but I suppose if it was like the perfect orbit for it. But who knows? Shall we have a listen to this interview?
I would love to hear this. Very exciting. Yeah, so go ahead.
Ekute.
You're listening to the Interplanetary podcast, putting the ace back into space.
So I'm joined on the podcast by Cathrin Machin and Ian Lauer, who are both artists, and this was something that came up on the Patreon feed. We wanted to talk about space art, have a nice episode about space art, and actually quite a few of the Patreons are astrophotographers. In fact, one of them is just unbelievably good, so this should be really, really interesting as well. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matthew. So good to be here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Whereabouts in the world are you?
Right now we're in the UK, but I'm originally from California and Kat's originally from Australia.
Well, actually, originally from the UK, but I normally live in Australia. But we're back again. because we just thought we would have another grey, miserable winter and with no sunshine.
The best place for this.
Yeah, that's it's a really good plan.
We're like, wow, we should do some astrophotography. Let's go to somewhere with 100% cloud cover. That sounds amazing.
And I plan to get out on the 21st of December to see if I can get this picture of Jupiter and Saturn right next to each other. This is one of the reasons that put me off astrophotography, was that every time something amazing happened, it would always be cloudy. We've had some really cloudy years, but let's not dwell on that. And anyway, Kat, your accent doesn't sound Australian. It sounds more Northern England. It sounds almost.
It is. I'm a Stokey. But what happens is it develops to be more Stokey when I'm back home, and then when I go to Australia. So I'll say home and phone, but I'll say look and book as well. So it's just, everyone's like, I don't know where you're from.
Yeah. Where can we start? So let's start with Kat. Give us a bit of a background of what you're up to, and yeah, the kind of stuff that you're doing, and this connection between art and space.
Oh, it's exciting. Firstly, obviously, I'm a space artist. I make oil paintings and digital artwork, and soon to be lots of crazy 3D printed sculptures. So I specialize in glow in the dark, which I know is a bit of a weird specialty to have. But I mean, honestly, like, there's only one thing better than, firstly, I would just like to start out with space images are like the best images ever. I mean, as far as having things on my wall, I mean, and obviously I'm biased because I love space, and I kind of get that. And hopefully everyone listening also likes space. But like, how boring is having a picture of a bowl of fruit? How boring is just actually, some of it's actually quite interesting. I'll tell a lie, but just generic rubbish that you see all the time. How much better is it if it's like a beautiful galaxy with all these sparkling stars and pictures of nebulae and just the Milky Way arching over, and that strange strip of light isn't just a light patch, it's a bloody galaxy. I mean, who wouldn't want that on their walls? It's amazing. And in my opinion, there's only one thing better than that, and that is space paintings or space pictures that are really big. Frankly, I prefer the scale. Yeah. And then there's only one thing better than big space paintings, and that's big space paintings that glow in the dark. So that's what I'm doing. So, but obviously that is just like, so I've set up a business where obviously I create artwork, and about 90% of what I do are reproduction prints. I only produce about 10 artworks a year painted, because each artwork can take 3 to 6 months, sometimes longer. Sometimes I'm working on something for years. So it's a slow process for me, but like, I just try to put in an insane amount of detail. It's a lot of patience. And actually it's taught me, it's bloody weird, isn't it? But it's taught me a lot about human perseverance. Like, I know that some people's things that, climbing Everest, mine is just taking on a project that's so insane and so detailed that I have to literally physically sit in front of it for tens of thousands of hours and just make myself do it. So yep. That's kind of what I'm doing. But that's the vehicle for kind of the bigger project. So what we're doing is all the profits that we make from selling this artwork are going into building a sculpture based on the Gaia space mission data. Look, one of my purposes in life, and I think Ian's the same, is just helping people see the stars, because I think there's this, I say it all the time, there's a massive issue with light pollution. Anyone that does astrophotography will tell you, like, it's all, and especially if you're in, heaven help you, from the UK. I mean, firstly, you've got to contend with clouds, as we were joking about earlier, but then you've got to bloody contend with light pollution. And light pollution, I mean, that's the reason why you can't see the stars in the day, because the sun is the biggest light polluter, technically speaking. I suppose it's, if you're arguing about it, but right. But, generally at night, you can't see anything because it's too bright. Of course, some of that is, residual shine from the moon, but a lot of it is actually just human interference, lots of outdoor lighting. And of course you need safe streets and stuff, but then it stops you from seeing the stars. And that is bloody awful, because I think we've all had those times when we might have taken like a trip, especially people that have like gone on a boat and gone out to sea, or have gone hiking or camping somewhere super remote, or gone on holiday somewhere, and they've just seen the full Milky Way. And when you see all of those stars, the light is so beautiful. It feels like it pierces your soul. Like it's incredible. And I really feel like as humans, we've been sitting under the stars telling stories of where we've come from. And, you know, it's part of human evolution. And yet, like the last 150 years or so, we've lost it. Because, you know, it wasn't too long ago that we didn't actually have any street lights. They're actually very new in the scale of it. I mean, it might feel like an age ago because it was mostly before we were born, but it's almost only over 2 generations that we've lost the ability to see the stars at night. And that I feel like seeing the stars is actually very much part of human evolution.
Our ancestors they lived and died by the motion of the stars, right? They helped them determine when to plant food and when to harvest, when the seasons were and all that. And they relied on the stars so much. And it's like Kat said, we've lost touch with that, especially recently. It's so recent that we've lost touch with that. And I feel like we need to reconnect with that. I mean, again, like Kat was saying, both of our missions are to get people to see the stars more and get them to connect with the stars. And, you know, people who, we talk about light pollution a lot, right? We talk about how light pollution is a problem, but to people who have never actually seen a sky full of stars, it might not seem like it's that big of a deal. Like, okay, we don't see stars, whatever. But I think the people who have actually gone out, like Kat said, and see the full Milky Way or the sea of stars in a dark area, when they go back to the city or the suburb where they're from, and then they look up and they don't see that anymore, they understand that light pollution is an actual thing. It's one of those things you have to experience to understand. And so, you know, one of my missions is to get people to see that, inspire them to get out and see the Milky Way in its fullest form, to see a sky full of stars, because then they can actually understand what light pollution really is and what it's doing.
It's like being a goldfish. I just had this occur to me. It's like being a goldfish in water, right? They don't know they're in bloody water because it's just their environment, right? And that light pollution is a bit like that, isn't it? You know, some people forget. Like I did this thing on Twitter where I asked people if they'd ever seen the Milky Way. And like most of the people said, you know, I've never seen it or I've seen it. And bear in mind, people follow me and Ian on Twitter are into space. And most of them had only ever seen it once, if they had at all, in their whole bloody lives. And then these are, you know, grown adults, which is phenomenal if you think about it, and heartbreaking in a way. But someone said something that really astounded me. And they said, oh, what? You know, that thing that Milky Way streak you see in photos, I thought that was just like a trick of a camera. And I was like, no, you're meant to see it with your eyes, eyeballs.
To a certain extent, they are actually right. This is one problem I have with sort of wildlife documentaries and astrophotography in some. I mean, I love astrophotography, don't get me wrong, but in some ways, there are pictures that sort of hyper-realize things. Like even things like the Northern Lights don't look as great as they do as they're in very good photos of the Northern Lights or of the Milky. You know, the photos of the Milky Way. Right. Are better than you could see. Maybe if you're in the Atacama Desert and you've been lying on the floor for like 10 minutes with your eyes shut and you look up, you might be able to see something that approximates a good photo of the Milky Way. But I totally agree with that sentiment of disconnect between what is almost a birthright of having the stars above you and connecting yourself to your relatives and all the people that went before you. I mean, if you think about your connection with hunter-gatherers that needed star information, and the fact is that, you know, the ancient Greeks, like 3,000 years ago, had even spotted precession, which is like this really complicated, hard thing to spot. And it's like, yeah, obviously the connection to the stars is insane. And the fact that we are losing it. I mean, here's a question for Ian, actually, or both of you, actually. Do you get excited when I get depressed when winter's coming? Although in Australia this would be slightly different. I get depressed when winter's coming, and but I get really excited when I'm walking home and it's starting to get dark and Orion's coming up, and because there's so much to see in Orion that I get actually quite excited about it. And it's just like there's all these little moments of joy when you see old friends returning.
It's so true. Literally the other day, I was coming out of I've set up my studio in my dad's garage, and I saw that there was a brief sucker hole, and we could see Orion. And I went out and grabbed Ian and was like, "The stars are out."
So rare here in the UK, which makes me sad. But I think maybe for more people who like stargazing or use telescopes, anytime where it's nighttime is a great time because it's always different every season, right? Winter, you've got Orion and the Pleiades and stuff like that. And then here comes summertime. You got the Milky Way out, and you can get nebulas like the Lagoon Nebula and things like that. So, really it just, whenever it's nighttime, it's a good time. As long as it's clear. As long as it's clear out.
Yeah. And of course, have you both been in Australia and seen all those things that we can't see out here, like the Magellanic Clouds and all those kind of things? So that's major jealousy there, I have to say.
Kat definitely has seen it. I went to New Zealand a couple of years ago, and I was able to see the Magellanic Clouds. And I gotta say, it's surreal looking at them. It literally looks like someone, when you get like a pencil and you just make a little smudge when you write your pen. That's what it looks like. Someone just took a pencil to the sky and scribbled in, and then took their thumb and kind of just rubbed it out in the sky. And you're just looking at it, and you're like, is that, you're like checking your eyes. What is that actually there? Is that a cloud? What is that?
First time I saw it, I thought, is that a bloody cloud or something? Oh, God, we've got clouds in our scenes. And then I realized it was the Magellanic Clouds because we'd gone out on a shoot. And it's the first time I'd ever shot the Milky Way. And the beautiful thing about being in Australia is you're always 2 hours, depending on where you're at, 2 to 4 hours max away from a Bortle 1 class sky, which is a rarity, right? So we saw it and it was absolutely sensational. It was really good. But yeah, so like basically I'm creating all of these things to fund this Gaia mission project because I feel like I don't want to just get things in people's houses. Of course, that's very important to me, but I also want to really share, like get people into it and help people see the stars on a bigger scale. And for me, I wanted to do a much, much bigger art piece. This one is 8 meters or 13 foot in diameter. And it's a chandelier printed in a crystal clear resin and suspended from fiber optics of the Milky Way galaxy based on Gaia mission data. And the Gaia mission, for anyone that doesn't know, is a mission that is doing parallax mapping. So, you hold your hand out at arm's length, close one eye, and then change which eye is open relative to the background. You can see that movement shift, and that's how they're using that movement shift but looking at the stars to then position them in 3D space. But the interesting thing is that the way that they do it is they're in the Lagrange point between the Earth and the Sun. So obviously it's like an orbit. Technically, the satellite orbits with the Earth, not something. I mean, I suppose technically around it, but it's around the Sun. And so it takes a bunch of images from one side of the Sun, and then it waits until it's on the opposite side of the Sun to take another bunch of images, and then it starts to compare those parallax data, which is super interesting. And then you can download it because it's free to access for anybody, and it comes down as a big spreadsheet. So technically you can download the Milky Way in a spreadsheet, which I thought was pretty flipping weird. So, in different chunks, of course. I don't think the whole of the Milky Way galaxy, all 400 plus billion stars, could fit in one sheet, but they did it in sections.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, they've just 2 weeks ago, didn't they, release the third set of data, which is like a big, massive chunk. Was that another 1.5 billion stars added to it?
Right. It's just amazing. And I heard actually the other day that 1,600 papers have been written based on the Gaia mission data, which is more papers than the Hubble Space Telescope. It's probably one of the they're using it for understanding everything from dark matter to the actual 3D structure of Earth. It's amazing what they're pulling out of that mission. It's incredible.
Yeah, the Gaia was definitely value for money.
Oh.
It's a really, really great mission. Yeah, NASA are definitely better at selling themselves than the European Space Agency. But yeah, I mean, you know, as UK taxpayer, I put a little bit of money in for that as well. So I love Gaia. So are all your paintings that you've done, are they technically related to space, or do you take a bit of artistic license, or do you go, or are you actually really sticking to data?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. I would say that as far as like coordinates, as in like the position of elements. So for instance, I will hand place every single star to be accurate, obviously relative to the image. But I might enhance things like the colors in order to make them look a little bit more vivacious and brighter, which of course, you know, the majority of images that we see in space aren't true color. But it's because often they're representing colors that we can't see. I mean, actually, this is a question I get often, which is like, oh, do you paint from photos or real life? And I'm like, well, firstly, I've not got massive telescope eyeballs with long exposures built in, because that would be weird. And also, it's significantly hard to paint in the dark, even with glow-in-the-dark paint. Yeah. So it's pretty much a no. But so I use real data. Sometimes we capture that data with telescopes ourselves, and then we incorporate that into my artwork. Occasionally, I'll use NASA data because, you know, I mean, no one's got the Hubble Space Telescope in the backyard in order to take really highly detailed images. So I'll use a mix of different sources of data in order to create them in particular. But there is a lot of artistic license. And I think actually, even with normal astrophotography, there's artistic license. What I realized, I've been watching Ian process data, and what I realized is how much, so you can get almost a very bland data set, let's say, and the amount of, and even like with the NASA data sets, which I've looked at as well, they often look very bland, very plain, and a lot of work. And I think any astrophotographer will tell you, especially people that do deep space, the amount of work that has to go into creating, it's not like it's painted in, but it's very finely tuned in order to pull out detail, to reduce noise, all of these different things that will then go on to create the final image, or to manipulate the balance of colors, you know, a lot of and some of it is actually just to correct issues in the sensors. You know, sensors are very well, apart from astro cameras, which Ian could probably talk about, most of the images that I've seen from astro stuff, they always end up green.
Yeah, well, in fact, I know Ian will back me up on this. There's even, like, in the software is the green removal tool. You really have to get your eye in to sort of spot it, because mixing a song and doing that processing of deep sky images is incredibly similar in the fact that you're looking at something for so long you can no longer hear it properly or no longer see it properly, and it's such an amazing parallel between the two. I find it a bit depressing that all art that I try and do these days to get me away from my computer always means that I end up back at my computer for hours on end, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, stretching some nebula to try and bring out to bring out the colours of it, and to try and get a bit more detail in the edges. I can't quite see the edge there, and then they pull it out, and no, there's too much noise. You
can always grab a sketchbook and do astro sketching.
I got a soft spot for the astro sketchers, the people that do the moon and things like that. There's something really brilliant about it. But you brought up a point that I was talking to with someone about a completely different subject, but about what's real. Because it's like, do you draw from real life? It's like, you know, when you take a picture of someone, you do know that photo's not real, don't you? And it's just like, it's really hard to kind of explain what on earth is real. So,
I mean, technically speaking, Matthew, what is real?
All matter is mostly space. It's all vibration.
Right, it's just energy. It's like, I mean, where you look close enough, the particles are popping in and out of existence and nothing really exists.
But it's so true, someone, you hear a lot who's saying like, oh, the NASA photos, they're just fake or CGI, or they're like edited, composite, it doesn't really look like that. But it goes back to the point what you're saying. When you take a photo with your phone camera, it's edited, right?
You take the photo,
it does the processing automatically and then displays the image to you, where astrophotographers are really just doing the same thing, but instead of that process being automated, they're the ones going in and choosing, what to brighten up, what to dim down to make it look appealing. So really it is the same thing as taking a photo with your phone camera, just with different settings.
Right. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that, a lot of the advancements in like phone cameras are actually all software driven. They're all like enhancements based. They're not technically real in that sense, I suppose. But I mean, here's the thing, like, you have to represent X-rays somehow, like for instance, or if you're doing infrared imaging, you can't see those with your eyeballs because your eyeballs are super limited. However, that data was picked up, they're real energetic particles, be them X-rays, infrared, or electromagnetic spectrum, particles, right? Whether they're photons, for instance, they're all part of actual data captured. It's just how to then interpret it, because, you can't see this stuff with your eyes because you need a long exposure because it's very bloody far away and very faint. And quite frankly, I think sometimes it's nice to have I like having those oversaturated and obviously I'm going to be biased because I'm a bloody artist. But the reason being is that it gets people excited and into space. Now, of course, sometimes you could argue in certain cases it might set up a false expectation. However, I don't think that's such a bad thing. I think often it just gets people started down a path of going, wow, looks really interesting. I would love to learn more about this. Or like, what the heck is this galaxy? Yeah.
I'm just waiting for the day they create, bionic eyes that can do long exposures. So that you can pick up the faint nebula in the sky. It's like, oh, is it still real?
For me, the magic moment for me was when I bought myself a hydrogen alpha filter, and I was in my light polluted garden in Surbiton. I mean, it couldn't be right next to the A3, super light polluted. But I was able to take the Eagle Nebula and Orion and like with a hydrogen alpha filter, it was like, oh my God, there's the Horsehead Nebula. And it's like, there it is. I can take it from my back garden. However, there's a little bit of, and I would stick those photos on Facebook and people would go, oh my God, and think, I'm going to buy myself a telescope. And I always used to say to them, look, a telescope's a bit of a weird one because actually, if you want to enjoy the night sky, it's much better to buy yourself a really decent pair of binoculars or just go out and enjoy the night sky for what it is, because a telescope, just a telescope, is like there's a few objects out there that do look amazing through a telescope, but it's a little bit misleading, isn't it, the astrophotography in that sense?
Well, it's this whole balance between visual astronomy and imaging-based astronomy, and it's like the battle of two different types of astronomy, and also what's the purpose of what you're doing? If your purpose is to be scientifically accurate, then just don't, and if that's what you're all about, because that's your passion, then sure. If you're just about, sharing your excitement of space, then zhuzh it up and make it crunchy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
well, presumably, I mean, like if you're the general public and you go to, say, the Taj Mahal, and you take a picture of the Taj Mahal, presumably you do your best to process that picture that you've taken to be in focus and maybe saturate the color a little bit and just make it that little bit nicer. But the funny thing is, we've all got the Taj Mahal in our back garden. If we're able to do things like astrophotography, we can see the Orion Nebula, we can see the Horsehead Nebula, you can see all those things, and you think, you don't even have to go anywhere with astrophotography to actually capture something like that.
Well, preferably somewhere without clouds.
Yeah. I mean, we do get the occasional day in England without clouds, I think. I mean, not for a long time, admittedly.
Waiting for that cloud filter to come out.
I've been shooting this picture of Orion for 3 years, and I've just got about 2 hours of data.
Well, no, don't even joke. That's about it.
So you talk about my real life. Huh?
I'm offended at how accurate this is.
Yeah, that is super accurate. Actually, we kind of were talking about it. Can you tell us a little bit about Hubble Palette? Because that's something that comes up quite a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, Hubble Palette. So essentially, what happens when you take, let's use the Hubble telescope as the example since it's the Hubble Palette. So the Hubble telescope has a camera on it, right? And that's how we get all these beautiful pictures. And it's a monochrome camera. So essentially, it's just black and white. And so what it does is it puts filters in front of it. Red for, filters everything out except things that give off red light. Same thing with green filter and the blue filter, blocks out everything except things that emit green and then things that emit blue. And then it combines all those and creates a real color picture, red, green, blue. Now, it also has special filters called sulfur, hydrogen, and oxygen. Basically, what it does is it blocks out everything except for things that emit a very specific wavelength of hydrogen alpha or S2 or O3. Mumbo jumbo, but.
And I would say for anyone that doesn't know spectroscopy, it's like if you get an element and you set it on fire, basically it emits light, but not at the entire spectrum. So obviously the spectrum going from ultraviolet to infrared, it actually just is like peaks in like tiny little points. Even though it looks bright, it's not the whole spectrum. And actually from being able to detect or just narrow it down to just looking at those tiny thin slithers and blocking out everything else, we can just pick out that one element. And that's kind of how the filters work. Is that right?
Well, yeah. So pretty much the filter only allows in, let's take hydrogen alpha, because that's the one we said. When you heat up, when hydrogen gets heat up or its ionizers are excited, and I mean, aside from the science behind it, it's falling energy levels, it emits a certain wavelength of electromagnetic radiation or light, right? And only that one specific one. And so if we want to only see that, it's going to get washed out by all the other reds and greens and blues out in space. So we put this filter in front of the camera that only lets in that one specific wavelength, like what Kat was talking about. And so we let in those hydrogen, oxygen, and sulfur emission lines. And when it hits the sensor, we get the data. And so what we do is instead of using red, green, blue, we use this color palette, which is we assign the sulfur to red, the hydrogen to the green channel, and the oxygen to blue, which is, you call it SHO instead of RGB. That's called the Hubble palette. And that's how you get all these beautiful golds and blues and yellows and gorgeous colors. And the best example of this is the pillars of creation images that you see from Hubble. Those are taken in, I hate the term, but it's called false color, which is essentially what they're doing is they're assigning the colors. But, the structures are actually there. The colors are just telling us what those elements are made of, right? So that's what Hubble Palette is you're assigning it that very specific sequence of emission lines to colors, red, green, blue.
I have a question actually, which you may or may not be able to answer. Like obviously being a great distance from the nebulae, light stretches, elongates because of course the warp of space. So actually, even when we shoot it with a color camera, which majority of it turns out red because everything is massively dilated, the time and space is dilated. So technically, even when we shoot it with a normal camera, that's not actually how it would look like if you were up close.
Right.
As long as you're not like dying in the vacuum of space, of course. But it's true, right?
Well, it's because we're taking such long exposures, right? Again, our eyes refresh. You could kind of say they refresh at 1/60th a second. So our eyes shutter time, right, is 1/60th of a second, but we're taking exposures of like 2, 5, 10, 30 minutes, letting all that light in and then processing it out to get an image. But, the thing with like Hubble Palette, what we were saying, you're basically reassigning the colors to make a really more colorful image. Your camera, like on your phone, already has filters built into it, right? It still is that monochrome sensor, but it has what they call a Bayer matrix, which is just a certain set of filters that are put over that sensor. So your phone camera is essentially doing the same thing that Hubble is doing, but again, just doing it automatically for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's assigning. I mean, the funny thing with the Hubble palette is that the sulfur and the hydrogen alpha, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they're both reddish, aren't they? So, yeah, so It's like if you have them both together, and obviously they're different parts of the structure. So if you have those two reds together, you don't see the entire structure. But if you move one so it's a different color, at least you can now see that beautiful structure that's in there.
Exactly.
And I think, yeah, that the nebula thing's quite a funny one, because I think Star Trek has ruined it for everyone. The fact that they often fly into nebulas, and of course that's just nonsense, because these things are so massive that if you were near them, you probably wouldn't see the color even then, because it's nebula. Quite literally, it's nebulous.
Bionic eyes.
Yeah. It's like it's very, very thin and very, very kind of
right. And also,
sparse.
like, it's like, I mean, it's like imagining looking out to, let's say, imagine you were looking across the if the world was flat. If it's not, I'm just going to go with that. But like, it's imagining like being able to.
Here we go. No.
Oh no!
No, what have you done?
I'm going there. Shit. I'm just trying to use this as an example, but like, imagine that you could see as far as, let's say, from the UK to America, or back from and imagining being able to see much distance. That's not a big distance at all. But the size of these nebulae are like, some of them are like 40 light years away. So imagine driving in a vehicle at the speed of light. It would still take you 40 years to get from one end to the other, right? Yeah. That's a lot. That's a big ass drive, and definitely breaking the speed limit. Although I suppose relative time, it would be, anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm going into another.
It's a hard one, that one.
If you're flying into a nebula, it's like, I'm flying into just what would be massively dissipated gas and dust and radiation. And it's like, but it's huge. They're bigger than we can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, one fact that I hadn't appreciated until I started doing astrophotography was the and this was great actually, because I'd have my camera set up identically in my back garden in Surbiton, and I'd be taking pictures, and I'd take pictures of the moon, the sun, Jupiter, and then nebulas. And I really got into doing nebulas. Like, for a DSLR on your telescope it's like perfect for doing nebulas. So got really into doing nebulas, and then I realized, hang on a sec, all of these are the same scale that I'm taking, whereas the moon fits quite happily on my sensor. Orion's Nebula is actually slightly too big, and you think, well, hang on a sec. So when I look out in the night sky and I can see Orion's belt and the sword hanging down, I can just about make out the star that's the jewel in the sword that is where Orion's Nebula is. And I'm thinking, so that little patch of sky there is bigger than the moon. So it's not even the scale of it that we can't see. It's the dimness of the colours that's the problem, isn't it, for the human eye? It's not the scale, which is why I think sometimes telescopes are a little bit of a kind of misleading thing. It's not about trying to see something close. It's trying to see something, trying to collect as much light as possible and show it to you in a new way.
Get those light buckets.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that I really, really love, like just going down the same path you're going, where it's like, the moon takes up the same or even less angular size than the Orion Nebula. When you think about the Orion Nebula, thousands of stars are being birthed in that region. So it's, this tiny region of space, this tiny region of the sky where we see this beautiful nebula and we get these awesome, colorful images from. That region is creating stars, thousands of them, that are the size of our sun or bigger. That's so crazy.
And are as far away as stars are normally as well. So it's like, this thing's so vast. I mean, they're slightly more compact, I suppose, but it's still, the stars are still unimaginable journeys that we couldn't possibly undertake even if we wanted to. We can't even get to Mars, and that kind of journey is so ridiculously small compared to the journey between any of the two stars that you would choose in Orion's Nebula that you can barely see as one star when you're looking at it, even though it's about the size of the moon. It's just like, what?
I love that, people like astrophotographers or astronomers, they'll throw the word light year around all the time. Oh, this thing's, 1,000 light years away. The Helix Nebula is 650 something light years away, or this galaxy's 2 million light years away. And then you think, we've never traveled 1 light year.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be amazing. Going back to the chandelier, this chandelier concept, it's where will it be, and if is the purpose of it to sort of really sort of give you that sense of just the enormity of the Milky Way and the place that we're living in, a kind of a sense of home almost.
Yeah, I think a little bit of all of that. I think of the milk. Firstly, I think someone said something really lovely to me the other day, which is that every time you go into a natural history museum, there's always the great big bloody dinosaur bones. Wouldn't it be amazing if you walked in and there was like just a great big representation of space? Firstly, that would be phenomenal. But secondly, when we see the Milky Way, be it enhanced or in person with our own eyes, we're only ever seeing it edge on. And we've never really experienced it as humans in its 3D form, as a physical aspect anyway. Maybe, if you've zoomed around at something that's an artist representation in a video game, but never in person. And I think there's something very interesting about tactile and physical experiences. And also, it's a sense of home, the Milky Way. So I was once out at Uluru, which is this very sacred monolithic rock in Australia, and they do this thing called dining under the stars. It's really cool. You got you're all sitting on little tables outside, and then there's a little buffet, which was awful, by the way. I absolutely don't recommend that. Terrible food. But at some point they turn the lights off and you can see all the stars, right? And of course, this is probably one of the most remote areas in the world. And it was interesting because, of course, I was there with my camera doing some long exposures, because who bloody wouldn't have that opportunity? And a guy came up to me and he's about 70 and he said, "Oh, excuse me, ma'am, what is that?" And I said, that's the Milky Way. That's part of our home, as much a part of our human address as our street or our country or, our postcode. This is where we live. This is home. And most people don't think of it that way. And I think that it'd be nice to sort of bring it into an experience that people are going to just have a look at. And also, I just think it'd be bloody cool. Like, frankly, just it's big and sparkly and gorgeous, and just something that would be just nice to just experience.
Yeah. So describe the experience. So has it got it home yet, or is it
no home yet?
Well, no home yet.
There's a few potential places, but I just knew that I had to build it, and it'll end up somewhere amazing regardless.
So I walk through the door. What would I expect to see?
So obviously it's suspended by tens of thousands of fiber optics. So it is going to be illuminated and sort of kind of sparkly. It's going to look very galactic. And I kind of have plans of having some sort of like spinning pads, like how you have an office chair, but kind of like lower, that you can sort of sit back and lie around and maybe get a little dizzy spinning around looking upwards, but have some experience like that so that you can just have a moment with the universe. I really value the impact of a single image. Most of us who've got into space have had moments where we've gone out and we've seen an image of space, or we've watched a documentary about space, or we've seen a movie or read a book or played a video game that made us step back and go, "Whoa, this is actually really cool." So it's all about creating something so grand and so over the bloody top that people have that experience. Because in my mind, probably one of the most important things now is getting more people into and interested in space, whether they become engineers or scientists or communicators of some form, because ultimately that's where I believe as a human race we're going to end up at some point in the near future. I hope before, unless we kill ourselves all before that point. Not to get too nihilistic.
Yeah. Well, I think you can point to space as being like a big driver of the things that might save us in terms of it's been a driver of international collaboration, at least.
Right. And it is. It's funny because I think that a lot of things are driven by space. Now, whether you believe that the universe is created by God or the Big Bang or whatever it might be, there's always a question of what came before that. And actually, all of religion and all of science is just people standing in different places trying to answer the question in different ways, right? Some people do it through, whether they're religious practice or mysticism or whatever it might be. Some people do it by trying to make observations. But humans are driven by awe and curiosity, and we always have been. We've always been like what's that interesting thing over that hill kind of cult, and that is why humans have been so successful. And I think that part of the challenge with modern day living is the fact that it's so hectic. People live in these busy concrete jungles filled with traffic jams and endless Zoom calls and feel very disconnected from all of this stuff. But actually, part of the core of what it means to be human is to be curious. And I think that there's nothing. What I love about space is there's no way you can look up at the sky and turn away and say, oh, gosh, bloody, you see all the glory of the stars and you go, oh, gosh, someone cut me up on the road, those bastards. You're thinking like, wow, this is insane. How far does it go? Why am I here? Like, this is incredible. Like, just the beauty of it. What does it mean? What do I mean? Like, you can't help but be, when you're presented with something so awe-inspiring, to ask these big questions.
Yeah, it takes you out of the mundane, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
I actually genuinely think that there's always a bit of a kind of a wrongdoing against scientists in some ways, is the fact that somehow if you're into science or into something like that you can't be spiritual. But, you talk to any astronomer or a particle physicist and they get spiritual about their subject. It's like that's what drove them to want to study the subject. It wasn't like someone showed them Einstein's relativity equations and went, oh, that's exciting, isn't it? It's like, no, that's not exciting. That's not the exciting bit. I think for things like these art projects, I think are so important. It's in terms of that's the thing that will excite you. It's not the hard work that you have to do to then further all that knowledge, but it's the thing that says this is why it's going to be worth it, right? This is, all those people that worked hard to make the Gaia Space Telescope and all those people that interpreted the data. The payoff is we get to see this. We get to see the extra kind of stuff, visualization, and what it is to be human from that hard work.
Right. Yeah, I think there's sometimes there's kind of this art versus science standpoint where people maybe will say artists don't understand what's happening with all the stuff that's going on in the inner workings. But then, artists say that science makes things dull, but they're both, they need each other. And I think space and art go really well together. Astrophotography, I'm biased, but as an astrophotographer, but I think astrophotography is the ultimate melding of science and art because you're using data, right? And all this equipment, you have stuff that needs optical engineers for the telescopes, electrical engineers to make all of the parts move and sensors and cameras work. Yeah, software engineers to make all the software work, and then you need photography, and then you need, you need the clear skies. You need all this stuff to work to create a piece of art. And so you're using science to create art. And I think it's so amazing to have the two worlds melding together. And plus the things with science too, we're discovering all of these new exoplanets and, we're living in this age where, if you were born after 1994 or something like that, you live in an age where we've always known that there are other planets around stars, where before that it was still just maybe, who knows, but with thanks to science, now all these artists are imagining now what it's like to live on another world. And you see these artistic renditions of, living on a planet that orbits a red dwarf and things like that. And so they kind of feed each other. It's like a positive feedback loop. You need science to inspire art, to inspire science, to inspire art. It's a beautiful cycle.
all my science heroes, the Feynmans and the Sagans, you know, they're totally. I mean, they sell that story bigger than anyone else, right? I mean, like Sagan forced Voyager to turn round to get the art, not for the science, but for the art of it and the connection with human beings. I think what the really fascinating bit that we were talking about before we even pressed record, by the way, was you've both got an amazing journey, which I think is actually quite inspirational in terms of people might be listening and going, oh, you know, I've got this hobby, or I've got it as a, you know, something I want to do. But both of you have made like a livelihood out of it, and a really good one, and you've turned your passion into something that you're able to do full time. So it'd be great if you could kind of, both of you, sort of go into how you've managed to seem to do what I guess some people might think is impossible.
I thought it was impossible. I still pinch myself because I was very much growing up with the get a real job. I don't know how many times I was told that. And that's why I avoided most of my life being an artist, because I had also, not only did I grow up with the get a real job, but also this massive stigma. And I still have this, I still feel, right, it's stupid. I run an insanely successful six-figure art business, right? But I still feel embarrassed to tell people I'm an artist, because I have this impression, and I say it all the time, but I just have this impression of people like bumming cigarettes and stealing, you know, sleeping on people's couches, just being like, oh man, you know. But it just depends on the way you perceive it, really. What we are is people that can visualize data, whether that data is emotional or whether that data is scientific. It's just a way of visualizing data in an interesting and engaging way. That's a very dry way of looking at it. But part of the biggest leap I made was making the decision that I was unhappy where I was, which I think is difficult for most people, because I'm an eternal optimist, and I suffer from this, the worst F word in the world, which is I'm fine. Right? Do you know what I mean? I hate my life, and I hate this job, and I don't like my bosses and my co-workers, and I hate being in traffic, but I'm fine. It's all fine. It's fine. I don't mind. Whatever. That's all good. Do you know what I mean? I don't have any life outside my work, but it's fine. Whatever. You know, I was that person. I'm so optimistic. I didn't even see how like miserable I was until I had a massive nervous breakdown, which I know it sounds really awful to say, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I highly recommend everyone have one. Make it a big one if you're going to have one. The little ones don't necessarily change that much. They just stress you out. Make it really big. Schedule it in for some time this next year, I'd say. But what it did for me was it's a hard reset, because I was working insane hours. I was working 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 bloody months. And after 3 months, I had it, because I, you know, how people say, oh, I work 2-3 full-time jobs. I'm like, how is that even physically possible? Because I didn't have time to, sometimes I just got home and I had time to sleep for 6 hours, and I have to get up and leave. And I would only be conscious in my home for 15 minutes. And that was enough to get changed and wake up and leave. Like, there was no time to go food shopping or do my clothing. I couldn't have a relationship or a life. I couldn't enjoy myself. It was basically probably one of the most miserable times of my life. And it took me getting to that point before I realized that actually you could actually go and do something you really love instead of doing something that you don't. What I realize now looking back is that you don't actually have to wait until you're having a nervous breakdown in order to make the jump.
Oh, thank goodness for that.
You can skip the years and months of misery. But also I felt like, and I know a lot of people have this, which is I felt like I was living a life with no purpose. I was running a video game studio, very successful, making very successful video game titles, and which was great, you know. But I was miserable because I felt like my whole life was around creating distractions for people. It wasn't necessarily around, you know, bettering people's lives. I literally, you know, games are cool when I was a kid, you know, and I still like playing games, don't get me wrong. But then I was like, is this it? Like, is this what my life is going to be? Is is this really it? Am I going to die? Like, is this it? And I'm sure everyone has it, is this it moment. And if you haven't, it's coming, right? Unless you're one of those lucky ones that just instantly found your life's purpose, and good on you if you have. And I didn't know what to do, because I'd spent 10 years avoiding being an artist. So I studied engineering, firstly. Bad move. No, it's a good move, but I spent most of it drunk, to be honest. Sorry. I know you're a university lecturer.
Well, I like I said, I was the worst. I did engineering and spent most of it drunk, yeah. It's the same deal.
But it's funny, the best thing I learned at university was I used to DJ, and I learned how to run an event. And actually it was that being able to promote myself as a DJ and being able to promote an event that has actually been one of my major successes, both in my video games, because I had to take things from initial IP contracts all the way through to development, production, management, then PR, then advertising, then post, and, looking after services, and then, of course, community management, which, of course, dealing with teenage and middle-aged man babies and ladies, who were very angsty, taught me a lot about community management. And that was interesting. So I got to this point where I couldn't take it anymore. I just couldn't do it one more day. So we'd finished the game development, and then I'd obviously gone on to, I just didn't know what to do. They were going to go on to the mobile development, and I was like, I quit. And that was probably the hardest and scariest thing, because I realized at that time I could never go back into video games, because I was now at a point where I was massively overqualified for everything. And I felt like I had literally lost my life. I spent 10 years building this career. This was the only career I knew. I knew nothing else. Didn't know how to paint, incidentally. I'd done some painting in high school, right, which in the US would be equivalent of junior high, and a little bit in college, which is the equivalent of high school in the US, right, when I was like 16 or whatever. But I didn't know what to do with my life. And it was the most glorious moment, because I got to do what I actually wanted to do, because I had nowhere else to go, because I'd already felt like I'd lost everything. So I thought, well, can't get any worse than this. So I might as well just do what I enjoy. And I remembered that I loved making art when I was a little kid. And I was like, I've seen Bob Ross on TV. I'm going to give that a go. And literally, it's as simple as that. I set a New Year's resolution. This is actually a New Year's resolution gone horribly wrong. I set a New Year's resolution to start painting. And that's actually where it all really came from. And actually, I was going to write the resolution of having an exhibition, because I thought that was a really cool idea. But I thought, you should calm down, Kat, and learn how to paint first, because that's probably more important. So instead of drawing me having an exhibition, I drew me painting. And I just I was working then as a cleaner, because I'd been so reliant on them. So, I was just, while I was in video games, because I couldn't run my own life, I thought, well, that's kind of a worthy cause. Maybe that's where I'm meant to be, which it obviously wasn't. My destiny wasn't to scrub people's toilets for the rest of my life, as I then found out after doing it for a while, which, of course, it's a really useful, there's nothing wrong with being a cleaner, of course, but it just was not for me. And so then we decided to launch Kickstarter, because one of my friends had suggested I should host an exhibition. And I went, wow, I was going to write that as a New Year's resolution, because at this point I'd been posting stuff on Facebook and getting lots of engagement. And someone said, you should do it. And I was like, A, I like a good party, and B, I like space. So I was like, if I can get a room as in Sydney at the time, hire a room in Sydney, fill it with loads of alcohol and fill it with loads of space, and we can all get blasted and look at pictures of space and talk about space. And I was like, that sounds amazing. Of course, drink responsibly. But my plan was...
In Australia, I find it hard to believe.
Right. But my roots are English. Yeah. Good old English. Yeah, we do like a good drink here. So my foray into business was actually all spurred on by me wanting to get my friends drunk. And it really was as innocent as that. I just wanted to talk about space and have a good time. I wasn't planning to change the world. I wasn't planning to do these big almighty things or create this, spirituality in the stars, Mecca under a gigantic chandelier. I was just trying to have a good time with space. It was just basic and visceral and just creating that sense of awe and fun with people. And that's where I started. And I thought, well, if I can raise $4,000, I can hire a room. I didn't think about if I can raise this amount, I can, pay me bills and stuff. I really wasn't considering that at the time, which, I was cleaning during this whole point, hundreds and hundreds of homes to just try and get me through this period. And we didn't make $4,000 though. I was physically sick when I launched it because I've never sold a space painting before in my whole life. And I thought, I got to be honest, my paintings were terrible back then. They weren't the worst, don't get me wrong. They were all right, but they're nothing comparative to what I'm doing now. They were pretty rubbish. This idea that you have to be super amazing in order to sell artwork, you actually don't. Even as an astrophotographer, what you need to do is talk with sheer conviction and passion about the subject, not about no one really cares about the actual paintings so much. They care about the space and what they mean, because every time they look at them, what's more important than the image is the meaning behind it. When astrophotographers come to me and say, hey, I'm not selling any prints, I'm like, well, you're not, if you just go, oh, I know, I took a 30-second exposure and I used this filter. No one cares. Yeah. Talk about what space means to you, why it's beautiful, what it inspires you to be. Talk about the history of it. Talk about what you're seeing. Talk about why it's important. Talk about how it makes you feel, because people connect to that. People don't connect to, this one I thought I tried 24% exposure because the last one I got star worms, right? Because no one cares about that stuff. I mean, maybe other astrophotographers, fine, but they're already making their own images. You're not selling to those people. Yeah. Of course. And we didn't make $4,000. It ticked up. It was, we'd made 4,000 in the first day. And I was like, I had made zero contingency for doing any more than that. I was like, wow. And then it went to 10 and then 20 and then 30. And then after 30 days, we'd made $70,000. And I was like, whoa. I said, holy, this is my job. I'd been searching desperately because I didn't know what to do. I knew I couldn't be a cleaner for the rest of my life. Even if I was then at that point then running a business doing cleaning, I didn't want to do that. And I couldn't be in software development. And I laugh about Ian talking about making scientists and artists work together. And I was like, that was my life, making software engineers and bloody a graphics team cohesive. Because there was always a challenge with that. And same with anything, But I was like, wow, this is my job. And I thought, wow, this is bananas. Like, what a bloody fluke is what I came to mind. So after I finished that and I served the project, I actually went back to working as a waitress because I thought that's never a thing, really. Obviously, I'd taken a few commission orders, so I was painting those as I was going. But bear in mind, for this whole project, I was only working 3 or 4 hours every weekend because I was working a full-time job and doing all this other stuff around it just to try and make ends meet at the time. So here's the thing, if you've got time to scroll on Facebook or be on Twitter or anything, you've probably got a spare 4 hours somewhere. I mean, I know it's hard for people with kids and stuff like that. So I appreciate this is easier for some people than others. But if you've just got a few hours every weekend for 8 months was enough to create that first campaign, which, bear in mind, was almost the same amount as what I would earn as a top executive. And it took me 10 years of grinding insane hours to get to that point. And I'd done it in 8 months and a few hours every weekend. And it's totally possible. And of course, this is a great thing. You never guess what? We're all connected to the internet and we have ways to talk and communicate. And as long as you can talk about something with conviction and passion, and I say this over and over again, but talk about what you're doing, get your face out there, even though it feels weird, like it's unfamiliar. It feels almost like, ugh. Obviously you, Matthew, you obviously spend a lot of time lecturing and you know, recording these and hearing yourself back. But you imagine when you start, you're like, oh God, you recorded.
I can't listen to the first episode of the podcast. That's for sure. It's so bad.
But that's the thing, you know, it takes practice. You know, we all start. When I started painting, I was rubbish, first off. When I started communicating science, I was rubbish also. But you've got to go, and also you've got to be rubbish and put yourself in front of people. So you've got to be able to be rubbish in front of people. Because, I mean, you can be a rubbish painter and never show anyone anything. With science communication and social media and that stuff, you can be rubbish in front of people. It's you know, I've always wanted to try doing stand-up comedy, but the idea of being that terrible and bombing out in front of people terrifies me. So, but you got to start somewhere, right? And so I was working as a waitress in a curry house, mind you, and I stunk of curry. And it was actually technically less than minimum wage. I don't know how I worked that one out. But anyway, that was a big boob on my side. I stunk of curry, like stunk. And it was terrible. And I didn't even get tips because bloody Australians, you got to learn to tip, man. Anyway, he was laughing. And then I thought, hey, wait a second. That last Kickstarter was all right. Let's give that a go. And I thought, well, 70 was bananas. That's never going to happen. Let's try 12. That seems more reasonable. Let's go for 12 and let's see how we do. And we breezed through 12 in an hour. And it kept on going up. 50,000, 100,000, 150,000. And it ended after, I think the next one we did was 50 days. It ended at over $250,000. And now I was like, all right, I get the message. This is actually my goddamn job. All right, whoa.
I'm quite surprised you didn't get the message at 70, to be honest, but there we go.
Well, I was really indoctrinated with this idea that you couldn't be a successful artist. I still have to battle with it every day because I was told it so frequently.
I was guilty of it before we came on air, right?
Right, but that we repeat the messages that we were told as kids, right? It wasn't necessarily a message that came from you. It's told to you by someone enough times that it's embedded, and it's still embedded. I have to work every day at saying, like, I would do everything. I would do all my housework. I would do the cleaning. I'd do my book work before I would stand in front of an easel because I still failed to recognize that as actual, useful, productive work. I was like, this is a bloody hobby. Go bum a cigarette and lie on someone's couch, why don't you? Sort of thing, right? But actually it was not. It's like productive work. So I have to work really hard at overcoming that myself, which I know sounds really rubbish, but like humans are weird, you know, and human psychology is a weird thing, especially if you've been told something enough times. So yeah, anyway, after that, I was like, right, okay, let's get onto it. But this time we developed a whole printing method. We invented a method of printing with glow in the dark, which it has never been done before and hasn't been done since. We've got now a new technology, which we're in the process of patenting, that allows us not. So the problem with glow in the dark is that they come as crystals, and the bigger the crystal, the longer the glow lasts. But of course, you can't. It's very difficult to suspend big crystals in liquid. They just sink to the bottom and therefore clog things like expensive printer heads. And especially for me at that time, because we were printing with a printer that was $40,000. Not great if you want to clog that printer head, because each head is like a couple $1,000 plus service fee and all the other delays it creates. So we created an entirely new way of printing, which is great because I feel like I stuck one to the man, whoever that man is, HP. I went to go see them. Sorry, HP, I love you. Or at least someone in one of their showrooms, and spent some time with them and said, hey, is this possible? And they were like, it's absolutely impossible. It's never going to work. You can't do it, which is the best thing to tell me because I'm always like, I'm going to prove you wrong. So we then went and invented it, and they eventually invited us after we showed them a sample. Even when we were showing them samples of what we were doing, they were like, wow, this isn't possible. I'm like, well, it's in front of you. And they invited us to go to their headquarters in Israel to show them what we were doing. And I politely declined because, of course, I need to finish my patent first before I show them anything. But yeah, so now, I've got a team of 9 people. And the way that I did it was literally to promote myself properly, put myself out there. And I say this all the time, but Some people don't put themselves out there. They don't promote their work. They'll sell prints. Astrophotographers, I'm looking at you guys. They'll sell prints and they'll just do one story and they'll be like, oh, I've got some prints, bye. And that's it. You won't hear from them about it for months. And then they go, why have I not sold any? And I'm like, because people have to see that you're selling something at least 20 to 25 times before they make the decision to purchase. 20 to 25 times. That's a lot of touch points. And it's not just seeing your artwork. They have to see the message of, hey, you need to click on this store link here. Have you got any other advice on this kind of topic?
Yeah, I mean, you have to sell yourself. Again, we were talking about this before. I think we turned on the microphone, but, you have to be able to sell yourself. We were saying, like, every person who is successful in what they do is a salesperson. And we have to get rid of the stigma of salesperson equals car salesman, because that's not what it is. You have to be able to, whatever it is, sell your story to people, sell your ideas, sell your excitement to people about what it is you're doing. Because there are people who want to eat that up. They love that stuff. They love astrophotography. And I think Kat nailed it with this, where it's like a lot of astrophotographers don't talk about how cool this stuff really is. They really just talk like they're talking to other astrophotographers. Well, I used, 30 exposures on the red channel and, 30 exposures on the blue channel. It's like, yeah, but, sure, other astrophotographers might find that interesting, but the general public, they might not even know what any of that means. What they want to know is, what am I looking at? What is this thing? Where are these colors coming? How did you take this? That's so cool. You just break it down and make it so simple. Make it something that they can connect with. Because if you can connect with something, now that you have that connection with them, you can bring them along on the journey. And it gets them more excited about the product or service or whatever it is that you have. So if you're selling prints, right, you want to be able to make sure that people can connect with that. Because no one buys a print because you took a, 5-hour exposure. They buy the print because, it's something that gets you excited, which then in turn gets them excited about it. And it teaches them something or reminds them something, that emotional connection. So, get yourself in front of people, talk about why it's exciting, why you love it. And you'll attract, I think the saying is your vibe is your tribe. Is that how it goes?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's quite a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to attract the people that you want to attract as long as you're being authentic and yourself.
What is your success? What has been your journey to where you're at now?
So I actually come from a science background. I studied astrophysics at university. But, I actually realized that I didn't enjoy research as much as my peers. My peers have gone on to work for LIGO or they're getting their PhDs and things like that. But for me, I loved spending time by the telescope. I loved the school's telescope that we had. And so I realized there's something about, the night sky that I want to pursue. I just didn't know what it was yet. And I think a lot of people can kind of connect with that, right? Like they have something that they like. It doesn't have to be astronomy. It could be, music, for example, like what you do. Maybe they're not a musician, right? But they love music and they want to figure out how can they make a career out of it. And so I was kind of in that position. Well, what can I do with the night sky and my love for the stars without having to go through what seems like everyone goes through, which is you have to study hard and get your PhD, and then you do research, you become a postdoc for 100 million years, and you have low pay, you get paid almost nothing until you find a research job somewhere, something like that. I was like, I don't want to go down that path. And, props to people who do that, because again, they do it because they're passionate about it, but I wasn't passionate about research. So I had to find something. And, I got an internship at a telescope manufacturer, and I was like, I like telescopes. Let's see where this goes. And eventually that led me to another company where I literally started by processing orders. I got hired by a company called OPT. They're the top telescope retailer in the world. And I started out processing orders and answering customer service phone calls. And after 4 years, I worked my way all the way up to becoming the director of marketing at that place. And we had some of the best years of my life were working there because I learned that I loved astrophotography. I never knew that I had a passion for it until I worked there. And I think what it really says is that it doesn't matter, what you're doing. If you enjoy, sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
So you were working at OPT and getting into astrophotography.
So, I got into astrophotography without knowing that I liked it. And I think the point is that you don't know what's going to come about when you go down a path. I think the important thing is you just have to pick a path. One of the sayings I love is action before motivation, right? We can't always be motivated or inspired to do things. Sometimes we just have to make that decision to do something. And I made the decision to go take a smaller paying job to work at OPT because they did astrophotography and I found it interesting. And all of a sudden, I was surrounded by the best astrophotographers in the world, and I was developing systems and imaging systems, telescope systems for, government institutions, educational institutions. I was developing imaging systems for professional astrophotographers, for people who do space situational awareness that track space junk and stuff like that. And I never knew any of those things were even possible. I just knew I liked telescopes, right? And I was like, well, I'll try, this telescope job. And it was so amazing. But I found that astrophotography was my passion. And it's so funny because when I was in high school, I actually took a photography class. And I wasn't a great high school student. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, but I was not a great high school student. I was focused on playing football and hanging out with my friends and playing video games instead of, paying attention in class. So when the semester ended, I realized, I'm failing photography, literally a class where you take a camera and click the shutter. And I was failing it. I was like, oh my God, I went to the teacher and I begged her. I was like, is there anything I can do to pass this class? Anything I can do? And she kind of just sat there and thought for a moment. She looked at me and she grabbed a brush and she's just like, all right, here, take this scrubber, go scrub the dark room, clean it. I was like, oh, okay, whatever I got to do to pass the class. So man, I scrubbed the heck out of that dark room. I made sure it was spotless. It took me like 2 or 3 hours to clean every little detail, every little corner of that dark room. And she passed me. And, I thought that was it for photography. Maybe photography is not for me. And 15 years later, here I am. I'm a photographer. Because I am now taking pictures and making a career out of it. So again, it doesn't matter what your past doesn't define who you are. It doesn't matter what you used to be into or what you used to not like or what you used to be bad at. Your past doesn't define you. It's just action before motivation. Just do stuff because you don't know where it's going to take you. And so I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's like, I never thought I'd be a photographer. I still had a hard time calling myself a photographer. I think astrophotography and regular photography are two separate things. One talks about, shutter speed and f-stops, and the other one talks about focal length and, 30-second, 1 minute, 5, 10, 30-minute exposures. Just seems like two completely separate disciplines. But it took me a while to finally, see that they really are the same thing. And, opening up a print store of mine really made me realize, okay, I'm a photographer now.
So what happened after OPT? Well,
after OPT, I was working there, and I think this is something a lot of people can relate to. So I'm 30 years old, and I turned 30 this year. I woke up one day and I had this feeling of just like, what am I doing? What is my true calling? I think a lot of people get that and then maybe just think about it for a bit and then push it to the side and then just go to work or something. Have their cup of coffee and forget about it. But that it kind of kept coming up, every day of just like, what is it I'm doing? Why am I doing all this stuff? Why am I, working 10 hours a day again? Okay, I am doing like astronomy stuff and I do really enjoy sharing astronomy with people, but working those 10-hour days and, having these just having to continually fix stuff at work, I felt like I was disconnected from my passion with astronomy.
You were working mainly in the marketing aspect rather than, really doing the actual astrophotography or being under the night sky.
Exactly. I wasn't doing that stuff. I wasn't taking pictures. It was taking time away from me actually getting out under the stars. For one of the things that I love to do is do sidewalk astronomy, where we set up telescopes outside of a science-themed bar and point it at the moon. We get to have beers and drinks and, point the telescope around and look at Saturn or Jupiter or the moon and just, get drunk and talk about space. And I couldn't do that stuff anymore.
Sounds like my kind of party, I'll be honest.
And so, I was starting to feel disconnected with astronomy, and I really just wanted to find, how can I get reconnected again? How can I bring that passion back? And, what I realized is that being out under the night sky is what I loved doing. As much as I loved sharing space through, a company's social media account, or, getting people the right equipment so they can share the night sky and take pictures, I kind of wanted to be on that other side. I wanted to be the one who's, sharing the night sky, not the one who's selling them the equipment to share the night sky. And so I made the decision to leave a high-paying, stable career path, as a director of marketing at the top telescope retailer in the world, and make the leap into the unknown and try and figure out things for myself. And that's a scary thing to do. That's a scary thought for a lot of people, myself included. But one of the sayings that I love and I repeat to myself every single day is, if you're scared to do something, but you need to do it, then do it scared. And so I made the leap. I told my boss that, hey, here's my 2 weeks. I want to pursue the thing that it is I love, which is getting out, taking photos of the night sky and sharing it with people. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it. So made that leap, and I found a way to, make income, which was selling prints. So it seems the logical step, right? Okay, well, I have to make money now. So I guess I'll sell prints. And so, again, with the help of Kat, she kind of guided me with here are kind of the things that work for me. Maybe they'll work for you. Promoting myself, putting myself out there, like, hey guys, I'm launching a print store. I hope you guys enjoy it. Like, showing off all the different kinds of designs. Again, showing people as much and as often as possible how passionate I am about it, how cool these prints are, how much I love space, and how much I know they will love these prints. And I launched my store, and I had over 200 orders in the first 24 hours for my print store, which is insane for me. I was happy if I got, 50, but I had over 200 print orders, which blew my mind, knowing that people wanted this stuff in their homes. And I realized, okay, that was that moment where I'm like, okay, I'm a photographer now. This is what I do too.
A successful one at that. So what kind of things did you learn by, in the process? Because you also had to do a lot of processing, which is not necessarily...
Oh my gosh. Processing, and look, I had almost zero experience with things like Photoshop and Lightroom, and even the more advanced astronomy software like PixInsight and things like that for all you astrophotographers out there. Get on PixInsight.
PixInsight, yeah. No, PixInsight, that's me. Yeah.
Man, such a powerful program.
It's unbelievable. But anyway, yeah.
Like you said, the green remove button.
I would say that, God damn, they need to hire a user experience or a bloody user interface person, because I have never been so attacked by buttons. I was like, this user interface, it's actually disgusting.
It's the worst. It's genuinely the worst. But yeah, you try and find, if you've forgotten where something is, it's like, oh, good luck with that then.
Their user interface is the result of when you get master's degree and PhDs in mathematics and software engineering.
And it's kind of forum based, isn't it? It's like, oh, we want this. Okay, yeah, we'll put that in somewhere. Yeah,
just shimmy this button in.
Yeah, exactly. It's jerry rigged.
You spend more time Googling how to just use the curves tool.
Yeah.
Where is the cool curves tool? You're there for 5 hours. I found it.
Oh man. So PixInsight, all you astrophotographers or budding astrophotographers, if you want to step your game up, PixInsight's the way to go. But
how did you learn that stuff?
Well, I just Googled. Yeah, just Google
thank God for YouTube. That's all I can say.
Seriously. Yeah. And that's the thing. Again, it's like if you don't know how to do something, dude, you have the internet. The internet is so powerful. You don't have to go down to the library and check out a book anymore and learn how to do something. You can freaking Google it, man. You got the answers to everything you need on your laptop, on your phone. Like it's amazing the technology we have today to help us become more self-sufficient. But yeah, so back to the print story. I think one of the biggest things I learned was after, my print store was successful, and granted, this was only a couple weeks ago, right? About a month ago or so.
Yeah, it's fresh.
I had astrophotographers messaging me, asking me how they can sell more prints. And, they're direct message me on Instagram. These accounts have like 50, 100, 200,000 followers. And they're telling me that they've never sold that many prints before since they've been around. And so what that told me was,
and Ian, for reference, Ian's which is an amazing amount, actually. You got about I got
2,800 followers, 2,800 Instagram followers, 2,000 Twitter followers, and like 100 Facebook followers. So, let's say I have a following of 5,000. There's other people who have 100,000, 500,000 followers. They could barely sell any prints. And so they're messaging me asking how.
What's your secret?
What it taught me was it doesn't matter how many followers you have. It's what are you doing to bring value to the followers you do have? Because there are people that are just chasing more followers. They think more followers will mean more sales. But it's like, well, if you're spending all your time chasing more followers, you're leaving behind the people who are actually there for you, the people who have been there since day one, following you when you had one follower. What are you doing for them? What kind of value are you bringing them? And so I think the ultimate lesson is connect with the people that you already have. Connect with the people that are following you already, because those are the ones who want to see you succeed. And by launching the store, they tell their friends about it, or they buy them as gifts for their friends, and then their friends tell their friends. It's just like this
cascade.
Yeah, this cascade of people. Just all of a sudden now you have this influx of people who are interested in what you're doing. And I'm not going to say I'm the best astrophotographer out there, but people look at my work and say like, oh my God, this is so incredible. And you do astrophotography yourself. I'm sure when you show people who aren't in that bubble, they're blown away by what you can do. And I think it doesn't matter if you're the best or you're mediocre or you're pretty good. It goes back to that idea of you're doing something that not a lot of people are doing. And that's going to blow people's minds. There's going to be someone who does it better. There's always going to be someone who does it better. But you have that connection with the person who's reaching out to you and saying, this is incredible.
I think also a lot of astrophotographers don't put themselves out there because they say, well, I can never be as good as Hubble. Why would anyone want my stuff? Well, people don't. I mean, as much as people want the beautiful images, of course, but people are more excited to connect with your passion. It is more important to put your face out there and say, I really want to talk about this. It's so exciting. People will literally want to support you just as a pause for course your actual passion and excitement about it. I mean, the thing is, I feel the most unqualified person to talk about space because I don't have a degree in astrophysics. I studied engineering, but I'll be honest, I was definitely drunk for the most part of that. And I definitely didn't finish my course. And I definitely didn't I passed a couple of years, but not all of them. And so, I feel woefully underprepared. And I thought, well, what gives me a right to talk about any of this stuff? And actually, I realized that even scientists, they talk about stuff that they've not necessarily discovered. They've read a paper on it or they've read some article. The best thing you can do is just make sure that what you're saying is factually correct by doing some good research and just share how bloody cool it is. Like, it's as simple as that. And honestly, I think one of the people's biggest problems about selling something is that they feel like it's all take and no give. But actually what you're doing is, we'll all know this. If you go into a store anywhere, you can buy 1 million things with pictures of flowers on. You can buy a bloody toothbrush holder and a rug and artwork and all sorts of things. You can find millions and millions of things with abstract patterns and all sorts. But you can't find anything with space. You have to go through specialist stores. You have to do Google searches. It's not easy. It's not there for everyone. So what you're doing is allowing people to have, probably, in my opinion, space is the most beautiful thing that exists in the universe, happens to be the universe. And you're allowing people to have those little moments. And I did like a little survey, because I said, what is the purpose of my art? Because I was like, do you know what I mean? I know that it's helping people see the stars, but like I was like, real talk though, like what is, because, you know, like, how do you summate the purpose of art? And everyone the overwhelming response was, hey, I have a hectic life. I am stressed. I am overwhelmed. I'm exhausted, especially this year. Heck, 2020 has been a year. Right? When I look at your space images, it reminds me that there's something bigger than what I'm going through, and there's something more beautiful. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm not just sharing a connection with space. I'm sharing people a tiny piece of beauty and release and peace that they can have in their home. So when the idea is like an exchange of value. Like, I'm giving people something that will make them actually really happy. And in exchange, if they feel like it's worth enough, they'll send some money over, and that will hopefully help fund these other bigger projects we've got going on in the background.
Where can people go and see your work, Kat, and where can people go and see your work, Ian? How can they get involved?
Yeah, so IanLauerAstro.com is my website, or you can follow me on any social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They're all Ian Lauer Astro. And just hopefully if you want to learn about how to do astrophotography, or if you have questions about, getting telescopes, or even if you just want to talk space, I'm always game to talk about that stuff. So don't be afraid to just reach out and say, hi, I love space. I know Matthew and Kat and everyone here listening loves space. So let's talk space.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. For me, Cathrin Machin, but both my first name and my last name are weird. So if you just Google Cathrin Machin, it will correct you.
I will stick both. I will stick all your links. Email me over all the links that you want me to put on our website, and I'll stick them all up
awesome.
and everything. It will all be in the normal show notes place. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.
If you were to bring someone back from the past,
I would bring back, if I have to be quick, Richard Feynman.
Feynman's the best. Kat?
I would love to bring back Einstein. I'd love to bring him back and be able to show him the results of gravitational waves. Hey, we actually found them. And just to have that moment, I think that would be just insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's even someone like Stephen Hawking, apparently in the last couple of years, that the movement there has been so amazing that even bringing him back, he'd be amazed. So someone like Einstein would be like, what the heck? Because he knew that gravitational waves would exist, but didn't think that they would be ever large enough for anyone to ever detect. So he just said detecting them would be impossible, but they're there. But it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. Final question then is we've got a space song playlist. Is there any song that a space song that you would like me to put on the playlist?
Man. That's a hard one.
And you're not allowed to have Bowie, because obviously we got enough Bowie on there.
So I'm a big, huge fan of metal music. I don't know if everyone else is, so maybe I'll do one that's not so intense.
No. The guests should have what they want. You can have what you want.
Okay.
Otherwise, it'll just become boring and bland. Go for the metal. I'll
do one that I love supporting small artists, so I'll do one that's maybe a little more obscure. It's a band called Being, Being, and the song is called Cosmonaut.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's a good one. Oh, God.
Beautiful, beautiful, proggy, metal-y, but still kind of 4/4 beat song.
Right, I'm going to check that out. I'm a bit of a prog metaler myself, though.
Oh, I don't even know what to pick. I'm like, I have so many things I like. I wish
As a substitute question, you can tell me about your T-shirt. I can see you've got Tereshkova, Ride, Jemison, and Ansari.
Promoting just women in space. That'd be kind of cool.
I always think a good space song to have would be Mustang Sally. Got the lyrics, Ride, Sally, Ride, which I always think.
Boom!
On that terrible bombshell, I'm gonna have to wrap this up. Thank you very, very, very much for coming on and doing a very inspirational chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
The Interplanetary podcast is alive!
There we go, Chris. That was two artists basically showing that you can actually, if you want to do art, make quite a bit of money from it. That you can make it a living out. I was actually found that very interesting myself. So I think that's good for podcasters and YouTubers and artists. Get out there and do your thing.
Who knows? You might be overtaking Elon at the top of the richest people in the world list at some point.
I've got to mention the absolute legends that are the Patreons, and I really cannot let this go any longer. They are the wonderful, and as I declared on Discord this week, Bob Hodges, who is my favourite human being of all time. He's out there working the weekends, injecting old people with the vaccine and getting as many people as he possibly can safe from this scourge. He's a legend, I tell you.
What a legend. What a legend. Thank you so much for the work you're doing, Bob.
And then there's John Benek, who keeps sending in his exploration photos. Very, very cool indeed. Corel Sim, salute you. Kenton Hokanson, Marissa Davis, James Wood, Ronald Hatcher, Tupper Hyde as well, Stash Shusha, Rob Annabel, Mark Schoen, Malte Keisling, Christopher Andreasen, Gene Watchtanik, Patrick Hayward, Alden Vala from Norway, which is pretty cool, isn't he? He's up there. You should...
Tusen tak, veldig bra.
Jordan El Kurdi down in Australia. And last, but certainly not least, Mr. Bob Moore.
Yes.
So we started with a Bob, we finished with a Bob.
That's how you should always start and finish everything. Absolutely.
Bobbing and weaving. We just need a weaver now.
Hugo Weaving. If Hugo Weaving started to support us, then we'd have bobbing and weaving.
Thanks ever so much to the gang. You are literally just, well, I can't, it always amazes me that people are this kind, Chris. This kind.
Wonderful people.
You still stuck in isolation there, Chris?
Yeah, I've got a few more days of quarantine. We've obviously come back out here because, the schools have all closed, so there was nothing holding me back in the UK, and Kaya's starting work back here. So we've headed back out here for a bit. We're in quarantine in the mountains in a beautiful cabin, so there's no complaints here whatsoever. We had a sauna day yesterday and sat outside and with a fire outside. It was fantastic. It was Kaya's birthday tomorrow, so wish her happy birthday, Spodcats, and we're going to just we've got a bit of work to do, and then we're going to have a little Zoom party in the evening for the lady's birthday. So how about you? What are you up to?
I shall just be working. I'm going to be working this week. No rest for the wicked. I shall be.
Oh, no.
I'm also working on my space video I'm doing for the Space Store. So that'll be the start of the Interplanetary podcast YouTube videos that we're doing. Space 101.
Yes.
First episode's going to be
Amazing.
About why we know the flat Earth, why we know the Earth is not flat. Although I accidentally kept saying how we know the Earth is flat and had to keep doing a retake, which is very annoying.
You've been taken by them, haven't you? You've been taken in.
I am. I'm slowly,
just subliminally
slipping over the event horizon of lunacy. No return.
Careful. Be careful.
Be careful. I'm treading on the edge. Happy birthday, Kaya.
Happy birthday, Kaya.
Be able to play that on the day and it'd be marvellous.
So many brownie points.
Time to go.
It's been lovely once. My
awesome.
First of the year. Hopefully the first of many. Very, very excited to be back on board.
Bye-bye, Spodcats. Bye, Spodcats. Bye, Spodcats. Bye, Spodcats. Bye, Spodcats.
Bye-bye.